Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the intersection of cannabis, the capital markets, and culture. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg of KCSA Strategic Communications speak with the business leaders, financial experts, cultural icons, legislators, and generally interesting people moving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Louis and Ann are going a little meta and interviewing me, producer Shea Gunther. Besides helping to put this podcast together, I'm also the host of the Marijuana Today Daily podcast, an industry news-focused show that goes out every Monday through Friday morning, as well as the weekly panel show Marijuana Today and the Weed Wonks, a weekly interview podcast focusing on marijuana legislation, regulation, and lobbying. I've been making marijuana podcasts for 6 years now, paying the bills with it for 3 years, and got started in legal cannabis activism way back in 1997, when I started what became the first chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, all of which we cover today on the show. I know I couldn't be more biased here, but I think we have a good episode. So don't sit back, lean forward. Now on to our conversation between me, Ann, and Louis.
Shea Gunther, how are you, my friend? We haven't talked in a while.
Yeah,
we talk every week, but
well, we haven't had you on.
Yeah, because I was on the show really right after when we first started working together. So it's been over a year, I think.
So what's new?
Everything. The world's falling apart.
Well, let's
my podcasts are going well. Everything and nothing and everything.
Well, we both work in the cannabis business, and the cannabis business has, for the last year or so, been really challenging. Right, the public cannabis companies are struggling to raise money. Many of them are struggling to grow product at scale. You look at what's happening in Canada. Our business has been up. We've lost a little bit. What has the impact of the downturn been on your business?
I definitely was way more scared, I guess, for my future when Trump won. Just like I was more scared for is there actually going to be an industry, that I can, survive in after Trump won? I mean, I was worried for other reasons, but specifically, right now, it hasn't really, I guess, impacted my business. I mean, I'm still kind of at the stage where it's mostly a one-man show. I've definitely have lots of people who help make the podcast that I'm involved with, but MJToday Media is mostly just a one-person show. So I would say that, I mean, maybe I would have grown faster. So I wouldn't say that it's had a noticeable impact on my business, but yeah, so noticeable with an asterisk on noticeable.
Well, and when we last talked officially about MJToday Media, you had Marijuana Today Daily, and us. Have you grown? What's going on with the business?
Yeah, so traffic is up everywhere. We have also taken on the Weed Wonks podcast. So last summer we started producing the Weed Wonks show with Jordan Wellington and Andrew Livingston, and that show I would say it's kind of like Green Rush, but with a legislative lobbying focus. So they talk to the people who are in the trenches making law, implementing law, making sure that people are following the law. And yeah, it was the first show where, we kind of approached it from the start, where we're going to start a show from scratch. Here's an idea and we're going to develop it. And I would say that we've definitely proven the concept. It's a fantastic show. Jordan and Andrew are great podcasters. Jordan was good at podcasting from the very start, and I kind of resent him a little bit for that, half jokingly, because I was terrible at podcasting when I started, and I think most of the people on our shows were not very good, and it took him a couple of shows, and Jordan was just good right away. So, so he's one of those people that are just good at that. So yeah, I would say the business is still, again, at that one man or one person show operation level. And, my challenge is to kind of bounce to that next level,
And And you're not just doing cannabis, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So, it's right. Yeah. So I have 4 cannabis podcasts and 1 non-cannabis podcast because Lewis's awesome wife Melissa started working with her just at the end of last year on Eat Well, Travel Often, which is a podcast all about travel and good food and that whole world. So yeah, I get to say I'm not exclusively cannabis anymore.
It's really fun. I just listened to the apple cider one. Or cider orchard, which is different from an apple orchard. Fun fact, go listen to the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Melissa has a really good sense of just like of the right people to talk to and the right topics, and she definitely pulls together shows really well, and yeah, so it's I think I figured I'm producing 9 episodes a week of different podcasts now, so my yearly count is going to be pretty solid.
How do you think, in general, the podcasting medium has affected the cannabis market, specifically looking at like investors? Like, are you seeing an uptick in like, people clamoring for more information, or you think it's like steady as she goes?
I think that it's still so nascent. I mean, like we have a really good audience, but even still, like relative, like there's just I think that there's not enough like really high quality marijuana podcasts out there yet, so that the ecosystem is just
I can think of
kind
4
of so small.
of them.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's Can Economy, there's the the Leafly podcast. I mean, I'm not going to start naming stuff because
he just set you up for.
I was talking about Marijuana Today Daily,
Weed and
Wonks, and the Green Rush. But shit, name all of our competitors. Go ahead.
No, I mean, but there's I would say there's less than 10 quality marijuana podcasts.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And the number of people who actually like make a living off of it and monetize their podcasts are. It's like me
and Seth. I'm sorry, Seth.
There's not that many people. So I am super excited to. I mean, I'm just super excited about the medium. I mean, podcasting as a communications medium is I think it's the best out there. It's the most humanizing. I used to be a blogger. I definitely like podcasting. I'll take one podcast listener over probably 25 readers any day.
Well, I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, now having done 120 of these or so, I love it. I mean, it really gives me the breathing room to speak and to talk, but most importantly, to learn from the people who I either want to work with and admire, or work with and admire, or just admire.
But mostly to speak and to talk.
Well, and let me ask you two, because I mean, you guys are both communications professionals. Has podcasting like made you better at just talking? I mean, just like just communicating with people, do you think?
No, I still ramble like an idiot.
No, I don't agree with you. I
don't
think
believe
you
that at all.
definitely have gotten much more linear in the way you speak, and I see it. I can't tell for myself. I literally have no clue. I tend to think I'm relatively self-aware, but I don't know.
I find it really hard to listen to myself. And whenever, you're like, this isn't like Ann on the therapy couch here, but like whenever you're like, did you listen to that? I'm like, I was part of it. I remember it. But listening to it is totally different. And I just have a really hard time hearing myself. I don't know how you guys listen to my voice.
I listen to every episode, literally every.
I really do try to. It's for whatever reason,
When I'm in the conversation, though,
I definitely see it as different.
Well, yeah, I don't always hear everything that the guest is saying, and I'm trying to pay attention, but we script this out, right? We write out almost all of the questions, and even though we don't stick to the script and we kind of go left and right, when you're in LA and I'm here, we are slacking each other, saying, okay, you go, or I go, or follow up here, or so it's really hard to pick it all up. And I love going back and listening to the episode and going, oh, wow, that was really cool.
But then I also am so critical. I'm like, I should have asked this question, or like, oh, this is an interesting thing we should have tugged on a little bit further. Yeah. And like, whatever, it's not going to be perfect.
Well, and it's funny because there are times where I'll be listening to the podcast and I won't remember what I asked. And in my head, I will ask a question, and it's the same question I asked in the show. I'm like, oh, all right, at least that was the right question to ask.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
you do the daily every single day. How do you find the 10 stories that you were going to put onto Marijuana Today daily, both for the newsletter and then for the podcast? How does the story make the cut?
I have a wonderful rhythm that I've kind of figured out over the years, because I've done, over I'm coming up on 900 episodes. So first thing I do is I wake up in the morning and I wade into headlines.
What time? Wait, what time are you waking up?
I'm getting up. My alarm goes off at 5. Sometimes I linger. I have a very cuddly cat, so sometimes she makes it hard to get out of bed. But yeah, I work from home, so it takes me about 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe from getting out of bed to sitting at my desk with coffee, and I start looking at headlines, and I probably 500 to 800, maybe 1,000 in a day of just headlines that I have to look at, and I have to say, okay,
wait. You scan between 500 and 800 headlines a day?
Yeah, so I have a huge number of Google searches and just different searches of direct RSS feeds of different sites. I have a whole bunch of folders all organized in a way that makes sense for my brain. And yeah, I have a light day is 500. If I sometimes on like a Monday, if it's been maybe a busy weekend, and maybe it's 1,200. If I go take a couple days off, it could be 2,000. My brain, though, is able to look at those headlines and say, okay, that's relevant. That's not. That's relevant. That's not. Because from those, so there's out of every 10, maybe one of them is relevant. So I parse, 500 to 800 headlines down to 50, 60, sometimes a little bit more headlines that are actually relevant. So it's not just like, 2 kids got busted. It's something to do with our industry or something to do with politics or something that's relevant that industry people want to read. That all gets done by 7 o'clock, 7 a.m. Eastern. That goes out in the newsletter. From then, I then cull those, 50 or 60 stories down to the top 10. What's the most important 10. And it's remarkable because every single day there's been 10 stories, and it's always apparent what's the 10. Like, really? Oh yeah, that's a 3, that's a 2, that's a 1. Like, I know exactly when I see a story, like, oh yeah, that's a 5, that's a 7, that's a 10 for sure.
So you're using the rhythm method, is what you're saying.
Ugh, he was waiting for that.
Wait, what is that?
Just don't ask him.
The rhythm method?
I said it was I had said to Ann, here comes a really bad dad joke, and she just gave me this look like, don't do it, and I did it, and it was really bad. But I'm glad I
mean, I know what the rhythm method is, but I don't get the joke. But I'm sure once I go back and listen to it.
You said you get into a rhythm in the morning, and then I said, yes. I never said they were good jokes. I said they were bad dad jokes.
I said that like 15 minutes ago.
That was so delayed. You were rambling. I mean, geez, it kept.
He wasn't rambling. He was answering your question.
It was a little bit of a ramble. I'm gonna go with a little bit of a ramble.
I'll get out of here.
All right. So, do you get pitched? Do companies call you up and say, "Hey, I want you to cover this story," or "I want to be in the."
We do that.
Well, we pitch him, but do other than me and Ann and Nick, do other PR people understand that you're actually looking for news?
So, well, first off, I love it when people from KCSA like blind pitch me, like they don't like it's just because of
I don't love that
process. No, I love that. I'm like, oh, this is the greatest thing. I would say that no, I mean, I get a ton of solicitations on stories just in general, and that's I mean, yeah, in media, I think if you are in media, that happens. The way that I work, though, I would say that probably the people who are most successful in connecting with me on that are when people are like, hey, I wrote this story. It just went up today. I just want you to, take a note of it. That I like, I definitely appreciate that because, I don't always catch like 100% of the things. So if someone has a good story and they let me know about it, then that works. And then usually I just put it right into the list. So, yeah, I mean, if it's good news, I want it. So
do you have, like the top like 2 to 3 reporters who, you're constantly using their stuff, you're constantly going to them and they're constantly getting it right, or they're just doing really good reporting? Who are your faves?
Well,
Are
I
you?
can guess.
Yes.
No,
I can guess.
no,
Okay.
this isn't a question to Lewis.
Definitely no. Well, I'm gonna let Lewis guess because that definitely makes it clear how clear I think the answer
Well,
to this
I know
one is.
one.
Well,
Obviously.
I mean,
Tom.
it's Tom Angle, right?
Yeah, it's Tom Angel, but I would
Angel.
say
Sorry, Tom Angel.
Angle or Angel? It's Angel, right?
Angel, yeah. So I would say it's Tom Angel, but I would say even like more days, like right now, like Kyle Yeager, who works for Tom. So I guess Kyle's guy Tom, is like Kyle is just killing it. Like that guy,
he must
that guy
have,
came on the
ears
scene and
everywhere.
he just cranks it.
Yeah, he really does. A machine.
And I mean, there's some days where he has 3 or 4 stories, on the day. And it's, I don't want to be the Kyle Yeager broken record, but the guy really does cover the news like no one else does. So yeah, I mean, Tom Angel's, the marijuana news, godfather. I mean, he runs Marijuana Moment. He is definitely the most journalistic news digger, in the industry. So yeah, Marijuana Moment is killing it. Bruce Barcott over at Leafly. Leafly has a good editorial team. I think they just got trimmed up by their layoffs. I think maybe I don't want to say, but I think a couple of their writers may have been let go, but I know Bruce hasn't. So yeah, and he's a podcaster too. So
it's not often though I see you cite like big mainstream media. Do you think that they still don't get it, or that why not?
Well, I mean, the stories that they tell are to mainstream audiences, so I definitely do cite them sometimes,
to your
but
audience,
for when it comes to the really digging into the industry, they're not really there. That's really where the Marijuana Moments are killing it, because they're just, the mainstream media people aren't focusing on it. They're focusing on the bigger stories of this state might legalize, or, here's a big number from a big report, but they don't really dig.
We spent the last 10, 15 minutes talking about Marijuana Today Daily, which is your daily digest, but your flagship show is Marijuana Today. How long has it been going on? Tell us about what the show is, because if people don't know what it is, I think it is a must listen on a weekly basis. But what is it? Talk about it. Go.
So Marijuana Today Daily is our daily show. Marijuana Today, confusingly, is our weekly show, and that's an hour-long weekly show. Goes out on Mondays, and it's like an examination of the top 3 stories of the week. And we have a rotating cast of regulars and hosts, and they're all complete badasses in the industry. Just people who are running companies and who are activists and venture capitalists, and just badasses. I mean, everyone on the show just knows what they're talking about. And every week they get together and they just create this magic. We've been doing it we started up right when Washington State legalized adult use. So we've been around for as long as the industry's been around. So the benefit of being around for so long is that we built up a stellar audience. We got about 30,000 people now listening to the show, and it's one of the better things I've ever made.
Well, you have a rotating list of hosts, right? You've got Chris Crane, Dan Grassroots Goldman. You've had Taylor West. Chris Lotlicker.
Penny. Oh, she's awesome.
I love Shanita. She's
we
so
had a
cool.
conversation with her last week. We know her.
But how do you pick who's going to be the host?
And how do you pick the topic?
The hosts, well, I guess I'll answer the topics first because that's the easier one. The topics are pretty much the hosts for the week figure out what they want to talk about. They take a look at, everyone is super dialed into what's going on. So they just, say, okay, what's the biggest story? What's, the number 2 and 3 stories that we want to talk about. And then they generate questions for everyone, and it goes out so that everyone kind of has some idea of what everyone's going to be talking about, at least a day or two before the show. In terms of who gets to host, so when we first started the show, it was Chris Lotlicker hosting, and for years. It was just him hosting, and it just got to a point where he, just because his business life was just pulling him away, we're just missing shows. That's when Dan Goleman started hosting. And then I don't remember exactly when Chris Crane started, but it was not too long after that, just because we realized it was cool to have other people hosting. And since then, Chris Lotlicker actually just hosted his last show recently. And so now it's Dan, Chris, and Shanita. And it's a really hard job. So it's like, if you want to try to do it, I guess you'd have to be on a regular on the show. You'd have to tell me that you want to do it, and then you got to do it. There's a quest involved.
There's a quest.
You got to climb a mountain.
How many rings does one have to get? And do they have to go into Mordor and throw it into Mount
50
Doom?
pieces of mana. Yep.
Yes. So let's pivot a little bit. I believe deeply that the industry owes its livelihood today to advocacy, and that actually advocacy today is owing a lot of stuff to industry. Your background is advocacy, right? You were one of the guys who helped found SSDP, Students for Sensible Drug Policy. Can you talk about that beginning? Like, how did that come about? What happened? All that stuff.
Yeah, well, so I was in 1997. I was a student at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I had really just started smoking pot. Like, I was a super nerd in high school. I got to college, and I'm like, oh, there's marijuana, sure. And at the time, I totally bought the whole line that Dare taught us, that it was this gateway drug, that it was bad. And I guess before I got too far into it, I decided I actually wanted to do some research, figure out if it was really as bad as they said.
So was that taste test research?
No, it was very early internet research. I mean, this is like the late 90s. So I taste tested it first, and then I'm like, oh, I need to make sure that I'm not going to ruin my life here. So I may have even had to go to the library. I don't remember. But yeah, but then I figured out that it was all just a bunch of bullshit lies, and that I have problems with authority, and I've especially problems with authority that lies to me. So that just made me mad and made me want to just legalize drugs. So what ended up happening is I was at the Rochester Institute of Technology. I just transferred there as a student. I didn't really know anyone, so I started up this pod club that kind of took off, and that was actually the first chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We had a different name at the time. We called ourselves the Rochester Cannabis Coalition. In that first year of operations. And then the second year, we actually changed our name to Students for Sensible Drug Policy. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, that being involved in that got you in a little wee bit of trouble there.
It did, yeah. What ended up happening is we had a very local organization that got into a very local dispute with the very conservative president of the university that we're at in Rochester at RIT. And I have problems with authority, and I was really upset over the fact that he did not want us to be like an official student organization. So he kind of pulled our application. He didn't let us be, kind of designated as an official student group, which would just mean that we could use meeting rooms, and I think we could bring a bus to an event or something. But because he said no, that just made me mad. So we kind of engaged in this really protracted battle with him, over the course of a semester, just fighting that. And it all culminated in me being in the building where the Board of Trustees was meeting. They didn't want me to be there, and they had campus safety kind of just surround me and tackle me to the ground and handcuff me and drag me out of the building. And then they kicked me out of school for 2 years.
Can I just read? So this was covered in the, you got some press coverage around this, right? Can I just, do you care if I read my favorite line of this? So a young Shea Gunther is quoted, "RIT students are deeply concerned about the abuse of power. It's troubling that Billy Colhane would use campus safety as his personal SS troops. They are not finished with me. They have lost. They just don't know it yet."
Yeah, I guess I regret making the just the easy Nazi reference, but I mean, but yeah, they did lose, and they just didn't know it. So yeah,
Yeah.
And then
That was great.
so that was the Rochester chapter, but it spread, right? I mean, it went to DC. It's gone all over.
Yep. What ended up happening is that next year after that happened, that was really, I mean, that was like early internet days. So like I was starting to just kind of interact with people just, through email mostly, just other kids around the country who were starting to kind of organize around this idea. One of the people, the first people in drug policy I met was Troy Dayton, who now is, I think he's
We've heard of him.
chief strategic officer at Arcview Group. But back then he was just 19-year-old hippie activist Troy, who I
Did
thought
he
was
have
cool,
long hair?
and we became buddies. He did. I think Troy did at some point, but I don't remember if he did when I met him. I think because I've definitely seen pictures of him with long hair, but I think he might have had it short by the time I met him. But yeah, and so what ended up happening is it was a lot of kids around the Washington D.C. area. There were some kids in Massachusetts. That next year after he got kicked out, we held a conference, and that was kind of the first kickoff to the student drug reform movement. We had all of these kids come together.
Chris Crane was part of that,
idea.
right?
So I think Chris Crane, because Chris Crane was originally involved with Normal, and I don't exactly know the timing. He might not have been there that very first year. Chris was involved very early, but I don't remember if he was there at that very first year. I mean, he was there a year or two after, but he came out of Normal because I think he was working for Normal, and then got brought into the SSDP circuit.
Well, and if you think about it, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is that, you, Chris Lotlicker, Troy, Chris Crane had a tremendous influence on the fight for medical and then adult use. Can you talk about the role that SSDP has played in the advocacy of getting cannabis as legal as it is today?
The powerful thing about SSDP is the caliber of person that it attracts, and then it kind of churns out after their involvement, because it really is. It's super passionate people who think they can change the world, and that's a powerful, awesome thing. And what ends up happening is, when they're done, some of them stay in activism, some of them go into the real world and do other things, but then some of them become business people, and like Troy Dayton started Arcview Group, and Chris Crane started Forefront. What that means is that there's all these just kind of activist evangelists out there in the world of legal business who their foundations were SSDP and, solving problems and saving the world from, this stupid idea that drugs should be criminalized. That's the power of SSDP and the big impact. Shalene Title is, one of the lead regulators of Massachusetts. She is out of SSDP, and Massachusetts has as progressive as a policy as it does because she has been pushing for it. So that's the powerful thing about SSDP is it churns out super smart, accomplished people who know what the right thing to do is.
This year, we're going to see between 6 and 9 states have legislation or ballot, either legislation going through their assemblies and legislatures, or ballot initiatives. And up until probably 18, it's been a pretty consistent march forward. We lost a little, we won a little bit in 18, we lost a little bit in 18. What are your thoughts about what 2020 looks like from more states coming over to either medical or adult use?
Yeah, I think this year's gonna be a big one. We just had Connecticut introduce legislation. Was it yesterday or today? The tide is completely turning, and the fact that we actually have legislatively imposed legalization that's kind of on the horizon is amazing, because the way that our kind of industry got started is by ballot initiative. but now, legislatures are starting to just kind of wake up to the realities of the world and to realize that if they don't kind of write a system, then maybe their voters are going to impose something that maybe is not as good, or in the states where they just don't have ballot initiatives, they're looking at the tax revenue that's flowing over the states to their bordering.
That's
neighbors
that's what's
that have
happening in New
legalization.
York, right? I mean, Liz Kruger,
It's happening everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and anywhere there's a legal state, there are people going over that border into that state from neighboring borders. So that story is everywhere.
Right. We've heard that, 40% of the sales in Illinois comes from out of state. And that would have to give the surrounding states like Indiana pause.
I love that Illinois breaks down their numbers by percentage of in-state and out-of-state. That's the best thing. It's like they're just saying, yeah, neighbors, we're getting this much money from you every month.
Yeah. Hey, thanks.
What do you think the biggest story is going to be for the coming year? What's the thing that you're going to be like, I can't wait to put this in the digest, and I can't wait to cover it on the weekly?
Well, I think that the shakeout in the big businesses is going to be interesting. I mean, just the downturn in the capital markets has just been chaotic, and there's big news announced at Aurora today. They're laying off 500. So there's a lot of adjustments I think that are going to be made, and so those are just all going to be super interesting storylines because out of all of these, the fiery ashes is going to be some really successful companies, and I hope that they become my sponsors.
So talking about that, what you have had sponsors on. You have daily sponsors on both the weekly and on the daily. How does if a company is listening to today, how do they reach out to you to sponsor, and what are the benefits of sponsorship?
Yep. And business development has definitely been the thing that I've struggled with doing the most. So
dude, I've been trying to help you
right here. Yeah, no, totally. The benefits of sponsoring a podcast is that there's no more humanizing medium than listen to someone talk. I would say even more than video, because it's just listening. So the engagement level with the listener as a medium is just off the hooks. I mean, people listen to podcasts. They care about what the podcasters are saying. So in terms of value and getting your message out to people, I mean, podcasts are where it's at. And in the world of podcasts, we're where it's at. So we get the most listeners. We know who our listeners are because, we run demographic surveys. We pay attention to all our stats. And if you think about it, I mean, who else is going to listen to a nerdy marijuana show but a bunch of marijuana nerds? So, the people who listen to our shows, and this one too, are, they're marijuana nerds. They're our people. They're people who are, in the industry. They're looking to get into the industry, and if you have a marijuana company, that's who you're trying to reach. So
talk about some of those numbers, if you don't mind. How big is the audience? Just break it down.
So we have about 30,000 listeners. So Marijuana Today is our flagship show. That's been up for about 6 years. That gets about 20,000, 25,000 on the more popular episodes. Downloads every episode, which, just a little bit of context. If you have, I think it's like 25,000 downloads, you're in the top 2% of all podcasts. Like the average podcast gets like 100 downloads per episode or something like that. I think less
Really?
than that. Yeah.
Wow.
There's a lot of podcasts that no one listens to. Like if you have 10 people listening to your podcast, like you're doing something. Like it's serious. I just
pulled up our stats, and we just literally crossed 100,000 total downloads.
Yeah, that's a huge number. I mean, if you just think about 1,000 people, if you think about what 1,000 people would actually look like sitting in chairs looking at you and listening, because that's really what podcasting is. I mean, it's all of those people giving their attention to you and
it's
their
weirdly
time.
intimate, right? It's like in your earbud.
so yeah.
One,
Yeah.
like
one to many and a one-to-one conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Well, so I mean, you guys are podcasters. Like, you've had fan interactions, I'm sure. Like, what are those like? Have you been recognized by your voice yet? That's
I did have a fan interaction with an awesome trainer friend of mine in New Jersey, and he took a picture, and I was all sweaty and gross because it was after a class. But my friend John at Critical Mass, hey John, if you're listening.
I wouldn't say I go to a lot of cannabis conferences.
Oh yeah, we get that too. I've heard of you. I've listened to you.
I listen to you. I listen to you, and I always, we say at the end of every episode, thank you for your time. I really, appreciate it.
I say it too.
I know you say it. But it's true. I mean, it is a gift that these people give us, that they're literally listening to our voices and our opinions, and they get value out of it. And that is an amazing experience. Whenever anybody says that they listen and that they appreciate it and they get value out of it, this takes a lot of time for us to put together. When it takes time to find the guests, to book the guests, to prepare for the show, to record the show, to edit the show. I mean,
promote the show.
It takes, assume a show is an hour long, it probably takes between 10 and 12 staff hours for us, including your time, to put this stuff together and put it out. That's a lot of time, and every time somebody says thank you, as a business owner, it makes it all worth it. It really does. I mean, this is an expense for KCSA. This is not something that we make money on. Right now, we're not putting ads into it. We don't take sponsors. Nobody can pay us to be on the show. So this costs us money to put this out. But we do it because it helps us be better at our jobs. It lets us talk to interesting people. It gives us the ability to allow our clients to tell their stories in a non-compressed, breathable experience. So it's worth it to us, but it is a cost. And you are by the way, you are cost effective.
All right. That's good. You want to be at least cost effective. Well, podcasting is, even more than the written word, even more than video, for just communicating your message and getting people to hear just your thoughts. There's no better way.
We agree. We do. And if somebody is interested in becoming a podcaster, I would tell them do it. Just do it. When we started, Ann and I didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We didn't know what kind of equipment to get. We didn't know how to write a script. We didn't know how to do any of this. It doesn't matter. It just do it, right? It is an opportunity to express yourself.
Yeah, and it makes you a better thinker too. Just having to organize your thoughts, having to organize tell a story each week. It definitely, I think it makes you a better operator no matter what you do.
We get to put on our journalists' hats, and we don't do that. We talk to journalists all day long, but and we're getting pitched. It's very meta, but
it's really, really funny. I find it really funny.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Let me ask you guys about that, because what is the experience like being pitched? Because so if for the audience, for those listeners who have no experience with this, when you're a writer or a content producer, you just get bombarded with these pitches from PR agencies. And, some of the pitches are better than others, but they're all pretty much like, hey, writer, I have this thing, do something for it.
Cover me.
And now Lewis and Ann, because they are PR pros, they were always on the other side of it. Now they're podcasters. Yeah. What's it like being pitched?
Well, and we got put into, there's this big database called Cision, and we got put into the Cision database. So people, I think it's really interesting to see the people who don't listen. And, we're not fans of mass pitching. We have to do it occasionally. It just has to happen sometimes. But, for the most part, it's funny. And you must get that too. I'd like to have a guest on your show. And you're like, what? I read headlines.
Yeah.
It's a 12-minute headline blitz. And so it's kind of interesting that, people really, I understand the frustration with PR people. But
well, and I wonder too, and maybe, you guys can answer this. is there like space for just crafting super close relationships? Because like, I've been hit by so many people who
totally.
I can tell they definitely, they didn't listen to my podcast at all. And I just wonder, like, why are you doing that? Why are you
because
taking
they have
that
to check a
approach? And I
box,
guess,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is
It's a time thing,
Well,
too.
it's a numbers game and it's a time thing, right? And you get 20,000 downloads an episode. We're getting 2,000, 3,000 downloads an episode. It's not like we have this massive audience. We have a really good audience, and we have, if you're in the business of cannabis, we have the right audience, but it's not huge. So it's easy to just press the button and like spray and pray. Like hopefully somebody will bite. And to be honest, we have booked a few guests that came across as pitches. The CEO of Nug, that was a pitch. They were smart. They sent over something. They had listened to the show. They said, we have this CEO and we have a really unique and interesting product. And I was like, I'm interested. I was interested. I was interested in the idea. And he ended up being a good guest. And we've had a couple other guests.
Yeah, we definitely take them.
Yeah.
So we
it's
love
funny
them,
if someone can demonstrate in their pitch that they've actually listened to my show, I'm like, I will listen to you. Like if
you'll at least answer or take them seriously.
Well, there are times where I will see such a bad pitch that I will put my boss hat on or my dad hat on and send a note back to the PR person saying, look, I know you had to send me this pitch. It's clear you didn't listen to the show. It's clear you have no idea what we do. And here's how you could have crafted this pitch to be effective, and send it back to them. And then they will try and come back and send it back to me with what I said. And I'm like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. I was just teaching you how to do your job, but it's like, but there are actually now PR people who I have at other agencies who have pitched me that, Jennifer Sodini, she pitches me well, and we've booked a couple guests from her. She's good, right? I hope that our team is as good as some of the people that pitch us. They better not be as bad as the ones of the bad pitches that we get. I mean, those drive me absolutely nuts.
Oh, I love getting them from either clients or former clients. Let me introduce you to.
I'll be disclosed as to who. We get pitched by the PR firm for Kush all the time. Like, we want you to talk to Nick Kovacevic. I'm like, if I want to talk to Nick, I will call Nick, and he will take my call. But really, like, do you not know that when Nick has done the show before a couple of times, it's clear that just for a PR person, listen, if you are pitching a podcast, forget about anything else. Spend 10 minutes and just listen to the first couple of minutes of a bunch of podcasts. That's all you have to do. You don't have to listen to the whole thing, but listen to some of it.
Yep. I mean, that's what I say when people pitch me for things for the Daily. I'm like, have you listened to the Daily? It's pretty much me just like being like do my best NPR impression for 10 minutes. Like, there's
Bullshit.
no space for anything what you're saying.
You are about as far from NPR. I mean, I love you, dude, and I listen to the Daily almost every day.
Oh, I said my best NPR impression. That's what I'm doing. Get out of here.
Okay. Well, there is definitely cursing, and there is definitely opinion about Moscow Mitch.
But it's all said in the same voice,
Yeah, my tone is totally NPR.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And there are definitely moments where you go off in that NPR tone on Trump or McConnell, and it's just like, I always laugh.
Well, I feel like I have a responsibility not to bullshit. And when it comes to things that are extreme like Trump, I'm not going to pull any punches. I mean, the guy is an impeached rapist, criminal, corrupt asshole. I'm going to talk about him like that in my coverage. So
I do too.
Yeah,
Look, man,
it's always fun when people bitch about that.
Do you get a lot of people bitching about that?
Not as much. Pretty much whenever I get to talk about Trump a lot less now, but like especially in the fall, for some reason, he's just popping up in the stories a lot. And people would send me emails or they leave reviews. And I have no patience for them. I tell them what it is. And I'm like, nope, those are fun.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Ann wants to wrap up. She just said, you just totally gave me the wrap it up signal. You're like, wrap it up. All right, wrap it up. I was going to, that's fine. I got nothing.
Shea, is there anything else you want to touch on?
Well, I thought we were going Joe Rogan 3 hours here.
There's no fucking
We're
way.
gonna talk about
We
elk.
are not
Come
going
on.
Joe Rogan.
But we do.
On a Friday,
hold
you're gonna
on.
want to stay
So
around.
I got two. We're gonna do our 2 questions, right? The same. We're gonna
All
treat
right.
you just like everybody else. So I'm gonna ask you about failure, okay? Because you have built your company into, even though it's a one-man band, it is a successful one-man band. But to get to success, I'm sure you had to fail a lot. So can you talk about a failure that helped shape you into the success you are today?
Yeah, I'm built on a mountain of failure. I think I counted. I've started up like 9 entities, and I think I forget if it's either 4 or 5 of them have been successful. So I'm about a 50% ratio, which isn't terrible. I would probably say my most instructive failure was I was in my early 20s, and it was actually right after I started up Renewable Choice Energy, which is this big renewable energy company I started. And I kind of struck out on my own, and I started up what was going to be a kind of marketing and graphic design branding agency for the kind of environmental world, focusing on the green world. And my problem was that I thought I knew everything. And I didn't know anything. And I just had a pretty spectacular year where I burned through a lot of money, and I just fucked up, and I made tons of mistakes and kind of had to slink back home, just kind of a little bit crushed and destroyed. And I learned a lot of things about just like what it means to be a business, what it means to have a business, what an actual business is, like what you have something that's sellable, that's defendable, that only you can do. All those things, was all learned in that huge giant fuck up in my 20s. So that was my biggest one.
So the second question, thank you.
But what was the lesson you learned? Like, what did you take away from that so that you didn't fuck up again like that?
So I guess I'm probably to know what my strengths are, to play to those strengths, and the things that I'm not good at to get help at, because that's what I didn't do.
No, you can't know everything.
No, yeah, and I totally thought I did too. So besides just figuring out, that I didn't know everything I've built MJToday Media around 100% around the things that I am really, really good at. And that is something I didn't do earlier, just building it completely around something that I know I can do better than anyone in the world every single day, in my sleep. And that's what I have built my kind of life now.
What's the media missing? You read 1,000 headlines a day. What's the one that you don't see?
Other than that, The Green Rush is the greatest podcast in the history of the world.
We'll never see that
We'll
headline.
never see that headline.
Yeah, geez, this is so funny because I listen to this question every single episode when I edit. And I guess I've never really thought about that myself. I don't know. Well, so I guess I would like to see more Kyle Yeagers. Like I guess I get tired of the fact. Well, not tired of the fact, but it's ridiculous that there's so few people who are really digging into this industry. So I would just like to see more focus and coverage from mainstream media where they're actually they're throwing someone at the industry and having them cover it like Kyle is and like Tom is and like those guys are, because it shouldn't just be Marijuana Moment who are really digging stuff up. Washington Post should be. So more of that.
So, Shea, where can people find you?
They can't because I hide. No,
Where can people find your podcasts?
they
How
can.
about?
So, so they can. So
They're not going to
By
your
the way, hold
basement
on
in
a
Maine.
second. You now owe us at least $6 because that was 6 so's in a row.
What?
wait, I was saying so.
Yes.
Okay, you guys have been saying so all episode long. So
We have?
I just say that.
Oh, you know
and
what,
I'm
'cause we
not
don't
the
have a
interviewer
script.
too. I'm allowed to say so.
We don't have a
All right, the
script.
back-
I do better, when I'm not.
This is completely inside baseball, but every time either Ann or I says so, Shea gets pissed.
Well, it's a podcaster habit to start a question with so, and it's not just you guys, because every
I know.
single person that I make podcasts with, I have to say it, and it's something that I have to do too. It's it's a habit, and we answer it too. So yeah. What was the question? I forget the question one.
So where can people find you?
So that's right. The funny answer, well,
Maybe that one on purpose.
so MJTodayMedia.com is the actual company site. But if you want to listen to the podcasts, it's MJTodayDaily.com and MJ Today Podcast. And then Green Rush is greenrushpodcast.net, but you don't need help finding that because you're listening to it. And then Weed Wonks is the other show. And here's where I will point out the funny fact that I own a media company that is not engaged at all in social media because I think social media is an evil cancer on the world. So I'm definitely losing some money there, but I'm also a kind of a principled fuck. So yeah. So you can't find us on social media.
All right,
We
man.
love that about you.
I totally, yeah. And if Ann and I haven't thanked you for making us better at this, we've been working with you now for more than a year, and we are definitely better at what we do. The show is just better done. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening and for doing the work.
Thanks for listening. As always, send hate mail to greenrush@kcsa.com. You can find us on Instagram at I forget. I don't have it in front of me. And
either.
there are two separate.
Which is the dumbest fucking thing ever. You know what? You know how to find us on Instagram. You know how to find us on Twitter.
Outro fail.
But we're sticking with it anyway. We're not going to do it again. And as always, thank you very much for giving us your time and listening. Time is the only thing that is completely finite in your life, and that you choose to spend it with us is something that we never, ever, ever take for granted. And with that, one take, Shea. One take.